In the last video, we saw a simple useEffect approach for data fetching, and we've mentioned how it works for small demos, but once you actually use it with real users, you tend to see a lot of bugs with it. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why hand managing the asynchronous state of our component is what makes data fetching in React more complicated, even though just calling fetch is very simple. We'll start with the first bug here, which is a race condition that might occur if the user clicks between the different categories that you have here quick enough. Now, as you can see, I just landed on the movies category. However, I still see the bookmarks from the videos category. And to understand what happened here, let me switch over to this chart here. So what happened here is that we went to the videos tab, which happens to be a very long query to fetch from our API. And then shortly after, we clicked on movies, which loaded very quickly. So what happened here is that we went to videos, then to movies. We updated the bookmarks to show the movies bookmarks. And then once we actually received our data from the videos, that's the one that we called our set bookmarks with. And so we ended up with an inconsistent UI where it says that we are on the movies category here. However, we're actually seeing the values or the bookmarks from the videos tab instead. Now, the React documentation says that we can fix this with a cleanup function and a ignore variable, which basically looks something like this. We will create a variable, let's call it ignore, and we'll set that by default to false. And at the bottom of our useEffect, we're going to return a cleanup function where we set ignore to true. And then instead of just setting the bookmarks value right here, what we'll do instead is that we will check if it's not ignored, then we're gonna set the value of the bookmarks. Otherwise, we'll just ignore it and do nothing. And essentially what happens here is that the effect cleanup function gets called every time the category gets changed. And so we're setting the local ignore value here to true. So if a fetch response comes in after that, it basically would not call the set bookmarks function for it. So if I was on movies and the value then was false, and then we changed it or we cleaned it up and we went to a different category, now it is set to true. So whatever value comes from that function or from this effect, it will not get to call the set bookmarks state function or set mutation here. As you can see, it's very not intuitive and it could be very easy to miss. But what it will give us is that if I now save this, and we go back to our application, we'll never get to a situation where we are on the movies tab or the videos tab and we're seeing values from a different one. It takes a second to load, but that's the second issue we're going to be talking about right now, which is having a loading state. Now, our application does not know if the values that we're seeing right now is a stale value from the previous category that we had selected, or if it is the current value. And if we wanted to fix that, we'll have to basically do that manually by creating another state here. We'll call it is loading. And here's the set is loading, which is a use state. By default, it will be set to false. And now when we get into the useEffect, first thing we'll do is call is loading or set is loading. And we'll set that to true. And then at the end of setting our bookmarks, we're gonna set the loading state to false. So now it's done loading. And we'll have to do the same thing for our error as well. So over here, once we set the error, that means we also resolve the state. So in that case, we'll set the is loading value to false. Now, one thing that it looks like we've missed is that also when we set a value, we need to make sure that we're setting the error here to null. So we'll call set error to null. That way, if there was an error that we've received before, but then we changed it to another category and that category did not have an error or resolved actual values, we can get to reset that state there. Now let's save this. And now we can come over here, or actually we could do this right here, and we'll have if the state was is loading, we're just gonna show a content that says loading bookmarks and dot. Now if I save this, as we switch between the states, we get loading bookmarks, and then we get the value updated. The third issue we have here is that with our default value here for bookmarks being an empty array, we don't really have a way to distinguish between no data yet or no data at all. This is kind of difficult to demonstrate because we've already added a bunch of things like the loading state and the catch state here for if there's no category being provided. That is because we have the default value for our state here being an empty array, when this actually should be defaulted to an undefined. That way, if we have not loaded any bookmarks at all, we should not kind of trick the user into saying that nothing has been loaded. For example, this empty category here, we should show the user no bookmarks yet. However, if we had another category which actually does not trigger any API calls at all, this will still show us the no bookmarks yet, even though it's not really a response, or we have not even tried to get this response from the API. So this better be an undefined instead of an empty value. That way we're showing the true state or the true value of our application here. Let's see what's happening on line 49. Actually, it just goes away if we reload the page. The fourth issue that we have here is something that we've already resolved when we added the set error to null, which is the misalignment between the data and error. They do not reset when the category changes. We had to do that manually ourselves every time we click on a new category. We had to reset the value of the data and update the value of the data and reset the value of errors, which again would really have been a nice thing that if we had not needed to worry about that. And the application was smart enough to understand that when we change the category, then we're really resetting the values or resetting the state of the component altogether. That is another thing that we'll be able to fix once we use a library like React Query. The fifth issue we have here is that fetch only rejects on network errors, not HTTP errors. Meaning if the server was completely down or your internet was down, then you'll get an error. This is the only error that you'll be able to catch over here. However, if you get a 404 or not found errors or 500 errors from the server, you basically don't get anything. And so we'll have to add our own manual error handling or our own error interception here. And so to do that, we're gonna update our logic here one more time by basically making sure that we return this, as well as checking if the response was not okay, in which case we want to throw in error of failed to load data. That way when we throw the error from here, it will be caught by our existing error handler here, and then we'll be able to show that error to the user. So this is not really an issue of using the useEffect with the fetch. However, it's really an issue of the fetch request itself, that it does not handle our HTTP errors by default. So our simple useEffect that we started with ended up with over 24 lines of code that we added just for the effect part, in addition to all the other auxiliary stuff that we had to add all around. So we added an ignore flag, we added the cleanup logic, we added a loading state, we captured the error properly from our fetch response, and we made sure that we're handling stale data properly so that we don't have any of those race conditions. All of this, and we haven't even discussed caching or reusing the same data in multiple components, which raises a very natural question. If almost every component that is going to be fetching data is going to have to deal with all of these situations here, all of these different scenarios and states that we have to handle, is there a way that we can extract this logic into a reusable tool? And that's exactly where libraries like React Query comes in. This library kind of treats the server as if it was an asynchronous state, similar to the use state that we have here, only that it's handled by the server, and then it handles all the messy transitions for you. You'll still need to write your own fetch function here, but the library is going to handle the loading state, the error state, the caching issues, the race condition, stale data, all of those things will be handled for you out of the box with zero configurations needed. In the next video, we're going to rewrite our bookmarks application here using React Query, and we'll see how much of this code is going to disappear.